IBM. This is an interesting case. I remember investing in IBM as a young man, and the stock did great, got up to 100 or something, and then one day it started down, and I kept thinking it would slow down, but it kept falling and falling. By 1992, it had dropped to an all-time low at 47, and I was so panicked, and I hadn't sold, and I thought, oh, what a mess. When IBM, this great company, had to fire 135,000 employees. Never fired anybody before, unless for cause. It wrote off $6 billion the month that Lou Gerstner took over as president of that company. And its stock had been hit all-time low. So, we're going to get to a question in a minute, but I thought before we do that, I'd show you a little about leadership and how leadership can change by timing and the role. So there's some people who have great skill as leaders who can create things. They are startup leaders. They can get a company going from 0 on up, or 0 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. They do it really well. And Tom Watson, and here's Tom Watson in the first IBM headquarters on Madison Avenue. This was the work environment back then. Looks pretty nice. And of course, what about, tell me about this picture. What do you see that's quite amazing?
It's all men.
What's that?
All men in white shirts.
IBM, blue suits, white shirt, I wore those intentionally. And probably this tie would have worked well for IBM. But everybody was alike. It was like being in the Army. But that's the way IBM started. And then the maintainer was his son, Tom Watson Jr., took over. And he was going to maintain, he did maintain IBM at a very high level, going well, growing, doing great things. I won't go through all that. And he was also responsible for IBM building some of the best buildings ever. They did great buildings as their headquarters. And he was key. From Saarinen and SOM and many others, they did these wonderful buildings that were about the work environment, about a place to show off the quality of their company. But they weren't icons in the sense of that today. This was a building that Skidmore did, that Noguchi did the sculpture in. This is an enormous building and very spacious. We're going to see a little bit later that these corridors are about 12 feet wide. So, and everybody had a private office, private conference room, and as you'll see later, nobody saw each other, except in a few places. So this was in New York City, so it's not the same. And in Chicago, what I'm showing here is that IBM built great buildings. Opal took over, and later Akers. And it was poor under Akers that things started to fall apart. Not because of us. We did this building in Montreal for them, which was their corporate headquarters in Canada. But it still fell apart. And in 1992, or by the end of 92, beginning of 3, Lou Gerstner took over. Now, we worked with Lou Gerstner, and he was a fascinating leader. He said, I want to change, this is important, I want to change the culture of IBM through this building we're going to do. Now, would you choose, I want to ask anybody here, you've just lost you just fired 135,000 people, you've written off $6 billion, your stock's at an all-time low, would you decide to build a new corporate headquarters? Anybody here brave enough? Anybody? If you were the CEO of IBM, would you do that? Wouldn't you be afraid of your board? All the 135,000 people you just fired? All your shareholders said, what in the world are you doing? We got this big corporate headquarters and you're about to build another one? But Lou Gerstner said, we're going to build a new headquarters. Because that headquarters was not proper for IBM and for what he wanted to achieve. I Pei, by the way, did that pavilion in the front. This is the corridor in reality. And that's what you would see. You really saw a person in there. When Gerstner walked in here, he couldn't believe there was no activity. There was no sense of energy. Nobody rubbed shoulders. Nobody talked to each other. It was dead. Vacuums. Everybody was behind closed doors. He said, this doesn't work. This is why IBM's failed. Nobody's talking to anybody. And nobody sees anybody. The offices were always empty, actually. What would your goals be, therefore, if you were going to build a new headquarters? You just saw that. Everybody had a private office. The officers had a private office and a private conference room. And they were the ones who could use it. So here you start, with and you got almost 500,000 people in this group, almost 600 in this building. Lou Gerstner says you got too many people and too big a space. I want to change the culture. And he comes to us, he says, Bill, I want to design a building that will change IBM's culture. Now just think about, how do you do that? Do you change colored shirts, suits, no jackets? I mean, what would you do? Anybody have an idea? Yeah.
Give people the opportunity to mix and see each other, create some light.
And can we force that? How would we force that?
By how you design the space, where it's open, where it's closed, what you're going to run into as you go through things.
More open planning, right? Maybe low partitions, you see each other. Breakout space, places to come together, yeah.
I know back in 2003, GM built their new headquarters, and they kind of advertised like we want more innovative engineers, so we kind of building this new headquarters so we can bring that in. But just like what you're saying here, back in 2003, after the building was erected, if you went inside of there, it was empty. And I'm kind of thinking like they built this big headquarters and there's no one in here working. And that was like around in 2003.
Yeah, which today you wouldn't be. I mean, if they were building today, they'd have to make it. Okay. I tell you, we were being interviewed by a company called CalPERS in San Francisco. And I walked, this is how I blew a job. We were one of the 2 finalists, and we were walking through this place. They had partners even wider than IBM, and never saw anybody. Everybody had an office. They said, you know, you don't need a new building. Just put more people in this building. You know, and they thought I was crazy, and so I said, you need people rubbing shoulders. You need people to see each other. But however, we didn't get the job. So anyway, any other goals you might have for this building? Now, it's IBM, the world's greatest technical company. Anybody have any other thoughts? Oh, let's see what we have here. Look, if you find the idea of changing a culture through architecture crazy or not? You think it's a good idea?
It's crazy.
Okay. Why is that? Because the workspace will affect how you think and work, right? And you can design that workspace, the ceiling heights, all the aspects of a space that you want to create. All right, so how we got this job, though, I just thought you might enjoy it because you're architects and getting work and marketing is important. We did a series of interviews with IBM staff, and they picked 3 firms as finalists and said that we would have to meet Lou Gerstner by himself and present. Now, I had never met Lou till this point. And we did a lot of research about it. He came out of McKinsey. McKinsey's way of leadership is through questions, like case studies, and they always attack you through a question to make sure you know what you're talking about. If you back off your answer, if you don't show confidence, he doesn't go with whatever you said. So, and Lou, as he told me later, knew nothing about technology. He couldn't build a computer, he didn't even use a computer. Yet he's going to be head of one of the great computer companies. The way he could do that is that he would check, if you're recommending something, he would ask you, he said, do you really think that's good? I mean, that looks ridiculous to me. And if you showed any sign that you were backing off what you just said, you were finished. But if you said, no, that's right, Mr. Gerstner, this is the way to do it, then he knew you knew what you were talking about. But he didn't know what you were talking about. Now, it's a marvelous way to lead if you don't know what you're talking about. And he took over because his job was to turn IBM around, right? Okay, so now we're going to meet Lou. And the night before our interview, I was invited to a dinner party, and I didn't want to go in the worst way. But I went because I didn't want to disappoint the woman who was having the dinner party. And I sit next to this guy at dinner, and we're chatting. And I said, well, you know, I said, look, I have to leave early. I hope you don't mind. We have an interview with Lou Gerstner tomorrow. He said, Lou? He said, I was number 2 at Nabisco with Lou. Let me tell you all about Lou Gerstner and what's going to happen in the interview. This is unbelievable. We're the only one to do this. It's like having top secret information. He says, you're going to walk in there and he's going to let you start to present. When you're about halfway through, he's going to stop you and say, what are you showing me this nonsense for? I don't care what you did for Procter & Gamble or AT&T. What are you going to do for me? What's it, you know? And he said, take away the slides. And you put the machine away, and then you bring it out. But if you didn't know this was about to happen, you'd be a little upset, a little panicked. If he'd stop you like that, so, and he would be critical. He'd make fun of you. He said, well, I don't want to look at this ridiculous stuff. You know, intentional. If you were cool, calm, and collected as we were, because we were prepared, we just stopped the slideshow. Back then it was slides. Stopped the slideshow. And we took these models out, because part of the interview was to review with him various ways to deal with the project. And we did it both in model and plan. But this was a phenomenally wooded site. Their current headquarters at the time was here, training center there. And these were schemes we were studying on the site, where to place it. This was another one of their major, actually this was their major building, that was their training building. So we ended up with the scheme right there. But more important was how we went about it. We built all of these models later on to study different shapes. Because one of his requests was, I don't want IBM to expand at corporate headquarters level. Think about that. No expansion possible. The building cannot be expandable. I want IBM to stay lean at the top and grow at the bottom where it needs to grow to produce and make money. And you don't need more executives. So we had to design a building in this shape is based all on the rock formations that we had to build up against and the trees that we have preserved. So you couldn't plug into this building any point after that. In the class at Harvard, I asked most of these young, booming chief executives in the class, and they all were horrified that anybody would limit the next CEO by the size of the building. But Gerstner did. I won't go through the design in particular, but the whole idea was it fit in this beautiful wooded site. Lou Gerstner wanted high-tech in nature. That was the theme. So this beautiful metal, stainless steel and glass building set into nature. There's the main entrance. The boardroom is up here, and you could come out in this atrium and look out at this beautiful site. Lobby. And what they did, I thought, what they wanted to do was create a museum of IBM in the building. So every place you walk, you see history of IBM leading up to today. So everybody felt connected with the IBM of old, that he was creating the new IBM. And basically did it, and you can all read as architects, all open plan. Few offices. All the technology was here. All the open plan breakout spaces were along these perimeters. And, oops. Put this backwards. Okay. And this was the workstation. They went from private office to 75 square feet per person. And you can see the glass. People could see each other. That was the largest office you could have, slightly bigger than these. And everybody had views to the outside in nature, so it was high-tech in nature. And the major boardroom was at the prow of the building, like a ship. And it was isolated acoustically, so you couldn't drive down at the base of the hill and tap into what IBM was saying in the boardroom. It's all copper lined like a U.S. embassy, and isolated from the structure. Yes, Al?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The distance from one end to the other of that building
Long.
is long, isn't it? Over 1,000 feet?
Close.
Close. 1,000 feet.
Possibly 900, about 900.
All right, so
No, it is. Lou Gerstner stood right here.
it's like 3 city blocks.
Yeah.
All right? So what if you'd have stacked those?
We had, in this site, height
Yeah.
limits, because the zoning, this is out in Armonk, very strict building codes and zoning. He wanted a 3-story building. So let's say it's 240,000, each floor was 80,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That was it. And broken into 3 pods. And
Gives you a lot of light,
it's great light
great light.
also. And in nature.
Yeah.
And
Expensive in terms of time, though. Communicating.
Yeah, although
Whatever.
apparently, and that's a good question, Al, but apparently people
Yeah.
here don't really deal with, the way this is laid out, the departments that interact are close
Yeah, I
together.
see.
So it'd be fair to, they do meet though at the, very good question, Al. This is the board. They do meet in the gym, dining, has all the facilities. When you build out in the suburbs or the countryside, you need to provide all of the amenities, food, health care, medical care, workouts, all that locally. But, you sit out on these lovely terraces with the across the night, it's quite nice. And then the executives had the upper level with a balcony as well. So I mean, this is the question I did ask in Harvard, and we had the biggest debate on this. Would you limit the size of a building? I'm just curious now. Let's have a show of hands. Who would limit a building based on, your feelings of that day about the company? And who would say, look, forever and ever, this building you can't expand. You can build a new building some other place, but Nobody's about to build another new headquarters so soon as this one's done. So question, who would be in favor of limiting the size of this building? So IBM did not grow at the top. One. Okay. The rest of you, I assume, would not limit it.
It would be natural to make it so it could change over time.
So it has an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. So I asked Mr. Gray, I said, Lou, what about exit strategy? He said, there is no exit strategy. We're not leaving. This is IBM. We're not failing. That's really showing confidence, right? It's like putting an army up against the back. It can't move anywhere. It's got to go forward. And that's IBM. And that was the way he led. Fascinating guy. Anyway, final look at the top. Let's talk about IBM's stock price. Lou Gerstner took over. This stock was cratering. It got down to about 42. He took over in this period. But by the time he left, it was well over 110. And eventually went up to 140 to 200. And the only thing I was sad about is that instead of the fee, we should have taken the stock. I probably wouldn't be here today. I'd be vacationing now. But we didn't take stock. And current leader is Sam Palisano, and Palisano, very nice guy, and he's not tried to expand the building. So, and it's several years later. Anyway, okay, last case. By the way, how much? You go to what time?
At all kinds of time.
Okay. I have something after this is going.
Have you ever had a CEO before
got
with
an hour
that
right now.
strong sort of presence and the strong sense of what he wanted his building to be and how that related to
He was the
this
strongest.
case?
And the most outspoken. We did Procter & Gamble's world headquarters in Cincinnati as a young firm. And John Smale was the CEO. Later was CEO of General Motors at one point. But great guy and took tremendous interest in the project. But he didn't have the same philosophy about it. He cared. He wanted all open plan. He did do that. We had to sell it to the officers. Not easy. Who all had private offices. They all know how to open. But he was more democratic. He wasn't trying to stop growth because we were building another building on top of one they had. So he didn't limit it as much. He was more concerned about the work environment and their role in Cincinnati, the play of the building, their importance in Cincinnati. General reinsurance and all, we did a lot of corporate, none of them, I would say none were as involved in the decisions as Lou Gerstner. John Smale was, but Gerstner more from a whole notion of how a company is expressed in a building, rather than expressing a building just because it's sensitive to the environment and to the city. So he was unique. I've had him as a guest at Harvard. And in front of him, I took a risk. I questioned all the decisions he made in front of the class. And thought either he never talked to me again, but he was good about it because the class didn't agree with him on the very same thing you did, the limiting of the size. They felt that future CEOs should have the right to make that decision, or business should make that decision. And I tended to agree. You almost look like Lou Palisano. Let's go back. I'm going to show you.
Turn around.
Stanley, turn around.
Turn around.
You're hearing secret? Or what? No. All right, let's talk about this one. As part of the class, because the class is totally international, from all over the world, you can't just do U.S. cases. You have to do European, Asian, and elsewhere. So I chose this one because this combined, as you'll see, renovation, restoration, new construction, sustainability, everything you could think of in a project. And one of the most complex, Al, renovations you'll ever see. World Trade Center of Amsterdam. The client that we had as our guest at Harvard, a young man, at age 34 or 33, had started a business of consulting for developers. And he would do small projects and stuff. He gets called by the owners of the world, and I'll show you what it looked like. This World Trade Center, here it is, back when he was called. These were all existing. He gets called to ask if he would recommend selling and then getting out of the deal. There were several investors. Or fixing it up, expanding it, or tearing it down and starting over. And he had come up with a recommendation as a young man, and Al, interesting enough, in Amsterdam, if you make a recommendation, you're liable. So he's a consultant, right? They said, if this is the wrong decision, you're going to owe us several $1 million. Now, this guy didn't have several million, so I'm not sure what he would have done. He does today, but so he took a big gamble, and let's see what he was dealing with. This is what this project looked like. Just think about this. This is the entrance. This is the side of the building and the entrance. This is inside the building, exhibiting whatever, cars in this case. The ceilings, I mean, it was a disaster, right? Yeah, my first reaction is I'd tear the bloody thing down and start over. You know, these are the exterior wall and the entrance. You can't even find the entrance, but that is the entrance. Elevator lobby, you get off there, you're depressed. You go to work, you're really depressed. Look at the windowsills. First of all, not windows every place. The windowsill there is so high that you'll see, somebody sitting there can barely see over the sill. It's like looking out this window from down below. All right? So he had to make a decision. Does he want to redo the whole building or build new and create conditions like this? Oh, Amsterdam doesn't have that view, obviously. This is a building we did in Fifth Avenue, or the ceiling glass. So what did he want to do here to change the quality of this place? So he asked us to come up with suggestions. The first thing we suggested was the most expensive thing, which was to build a glass roof that tied every building together and created for the first time a base, a podium that you could have under this roof, workspace, play space, food space, entertainment, civic. In other words, picking up area that didn't exist before. There it is in model form. We'll talk about what we did in the buildings in a moment. This roof structure was key to our scheme to bring all these buildings and create a place.
He hired you? The consultant hired you?
The consultant hired us. We still didn't have the job to do the whole building, but he hired us to give him a basis of advice, right? So this was our suggestion. Now, this is a very expensive solution. You've got to build this roof. It's got to tie into each one of these buildings. It's got to be watertight. It's got to bring light in, and it's got to create new space. Now, what do you think the plus is? This is a good question, because this was, for him, his Waterloo. This fails, he's finished, okay? And again, the owners of the building said, we'll go along, but you better be right or you're going to pay for this roof. The roof is very expensive. Tell me, what do you think the advantages of that would be? I mean, obviously it creates place, but doesn't it do something real estate-wise? Anybody know? What's it do? What do you think?
You've created more square footage.
Usable space, right? You can use rent for retail, use for office space, entertainment, right? Also, architecturally, what have you done? You have tied the project together, right? Okay, so now it's one place. And this is a new building we added later. I'll go over that. So he decides, he convinces them to go back and to tear parts of the building out, redo it, reskin it, build new buildings, and create a whole new place. And you'll see a while later, it's a great site because it's next to the train that connects Amsterdam and the airport. Okay, so here we are, tearing everything apart. And this is Al. I'm not sure you could do this in America. They replaced the entire wall, piece by piece, office by office. They built, just imagine this, they built a partition inside the glass of plywood, to cut off the exterior from the interior. They then, in one day, removed the wall, and the next day replaced it. 2 days, they moved on. They could do 2 offices at a clip. Now, in the States, they had all been sued because every time it rained, or there was a lot of noise, you couldn't work in the space. But the Dutch did. They worked behind plywood for 2 days while this was all going on. It was noisy as hell and windy and cool, but they did. In America, no way we could do that because we'd all be sued. Al would be dealing with lawsuit after why we did this. But he could get away with it. So he reskins this whole building while people are working in the building, so he still has rent. He reduces the rent because for 2 days they're going to be disturbed. But after that, it'll be good. And then we start building some new buildings here and here to complete and add to the, and eventually more, to add to the profitability. So let me do some before, okay? Again, would you have the courage, looking at this mess, to say, we can make this into something great? Now, as architects, you should feel that, right? We all should, right? We're excited. Anybody agree? It's a good thing to do? Okay, Sam, you okay? Okay, that's what we did. Right? This is the new front. And this is the roof structure, which also from an energy point of view is quite good. And this is all reskinned. So you begin to see the results, right? Look at what happens interior now. All this is new space. Retail, for meetings, for art exhibits, for everything, all under the roof. These are all new spaces that we created by that roof. That was before, this is after. I think it's a big improvement. Okay. And then we started doing the new buildings. These are all with double wall systems, as we'll go in a minute, all sustainable. As you can see here.